Did you know Book Interrupted has swag? Check out our swag shop on bookinterrupted.com. There's hats, t shirts, tanks, and a whole bunch more. Go to www.bookinterrupted.com.
Parental guidance is recommended because this episode has mature topics and strong language. Here are some moments you can look forward to during this episode of Book Interrupted.
This one was a feel good where it felt like you can heal. Women can heal through these crazy, and really emotional, hard times.
He was trying to bring to light the thing that people don't know, especially about women in war, in that war, because of them coming back, being like, you're not there.
I liked the ending. It was very satisfying. I just wanted more of it. Like, I've been waiting for it.
It is really historically accurate, so I think that's really great because I didn't know that much about it.
Waterworks would have been everywhere.
Me too.
I did cry at the end, so not because of that.
Yeah.
I did cry at the end. Yeah, I found it so like her finding her place.
Newsflash: Sarah wants a happy ending. It's just like every book, you're like, it wasn't the happiest ending.
Who would have thought?
Every book, she needs all of the happiness to happen.
Mind, body, and soul. The information is the goal. Try to learn something new without being distracted. Mind, body, and soul. The information is the goal. Trying to learn something new without being disrupted. Mind, body, and soul. Inspiration is the goal. And we're gonna talk it out on Book Interrupted.
Welcome to Book Interrupted, a book club for busy people to connect and one that celebrates life's interruptions. During this book cycle, we're reading Virginia's book pick, The Women by Kristin Hannah. Women can be heroes. When nursing student Frankie hears those words, it's a revelation. When her brother ships out to serve in Vietnam, she joins the Army Nurse Corps. As inexperienced as the men sent to Vietnam to fight, Frankie is overwhelmed by the chaos and destruction of war. But war is just the beginning for Frankie. The real battle lies in coming home to a divided America, angry protesters, and to a country that wants to forget Vietnam. Let's listen in to this episode's group discussion.
So welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to be back joining the crew at Book Interrupted. I'm thrilled to be joining for our book number 4 of the season with our theme of women. I feel like the choice I made was such a narrow focus for the author, who's a woman, the main characters are women, and the title is The Women. So we're doing The Women by Kristin Hannah, and it's, for some of you who maybe haven't read it, The Women is a novel that centers around the lives of 3 women, mainly one, and their paths all intersect in different ways. And it's all set through the backdrop of the Vietnam War, which was really cool because I didn't know that much about it before reading this. And then also its aftermath. So it explores different themes of like friendship and loss and sort of the strength of the bond of women. So welcome, everybody. And I'm excited to kick this off and start talking about this book because it had lots of complexities and loved parts, didn't love parts. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Great.
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
Silence.
Yeah. I'll say, like, for me, I felt like the real main character was Frankie. She really reminded me of a character. I don't know if any of you have watched The Vampire Diaries, but the main character in that show, her name is Elena, and so I did really like the book. I like books about war, even though that wasn't the focus of it. I still kind of enjoy that. But I felt like the men fell right away in love with Frankie, and that really reminded me of Elena Gilbert because in the show, a guy will see her and it's like, oh my God, I'm in love. I've never been so in love with someone and I have to have her. That was actually one of the things I didn't super love about the book, but that was just something that, like, she really reminded me of another character just because of that kind of trope where people are falling in love with her without really even knowing her.
She's that
Yeah, that's
charismatic.
true. That's
People just fall at her feet.
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally, like main character syndrome, you know?
Yeah.
Main
Yeah.
characters.
You all feel the same way as well with Frankie and all her love interest throughout the novel?
I really liked the book. Last book I didn't love. This one I really liked. I liked all her characters. I liked that men were falling in love with her and that
Fair enough.
you know, it was difficult to read at times. Obviously, this book was intense at times, but I kind of liked that she, you know, that these powerful men. I mean, I was really mad about the relationship. I forget their names now.
Right.
What was
mean,
which
Rye?
one?
Right. Yeah,
Rye?
right.
That's the second guy, not the first guy. That
Oh,
she
Jamie.
thinks-
Jamie.
Jamie.
Who
With the
was the first
second
one?
guy, Rye, and what
Rye.
happens. I don't know if I want to put the spoiler alert, but anyways, with him, that was very frustrating. She was naive. Like she was, you know, she should have been smarter, obviously, but she was also young and we've all made stupid mistakes.
Really
like
young.
that.
She was like 18
Yeah.
when she went, right? 18?
Yeah.
Like, that's young.
Yeah, but by the end she was
Oh, that's so
27.
young.
No. So
So it's almost a decade of her life.
How old was she at the end? 27?
27 apparently,
That's
yeah.
still very young, but she had aged so much in such a short period of time. And she was so sheltered too before she went, you know, in her life that she was maybe even, she had very little real life experience, which is why she was maybe very easily bamboozled by somebody who flattered her heart rather than, you know, but wanted her more as a trophy than anything. Or
I mean, we've all done it.
we've all done it.
We've all been there, like stuff
Sure.
like that, where you're like,
420, yeah.
we didn't all make the best choices. And I feel like she grew. And by the end of the book, you know, I think it's awesome. Like Virginia said, that it's about that power of women and strength and how, you know, she gives back to the community at the end. And the beauty of the book was not the relationships with the men, I guess is the point of what I'm thinking.
True.
The beauty of the book was her relationships with the women and the strength that she had, you know, how difficult things were, and then how she grew and learned and then gave it back to the people who are also struggling with PTSD. So
I did not see that part coming. I thought that she was going to find her power when she came back and tried to be a nurse in the civilized nursing profession rather than the military one. I thought that when she went through all that stuff that she was going to find her power by going to medical school and becoming a doctor. I thought she was going to go and become a surgeon. And when that didn't happen, I was like, "Oh," and in a way, I was like, "Oh, why didn't Frankie do that?" But then I also liked that it wasn't so predictable. You know, it would be easy just to be like, well, she should just go to medical school. She wasn't really in the right frame of mind to take that on either, because, you know, helping people through their PTSD was maybe, you know, maybe she could still go to medical school at 27 now. I don't know if she would have succeeded through it, because you can't just be in surgery and then have a flashback and, you know, like start doing stuff that maybe you want to do if you're not in a war zone. Or whatever, right? So I totally thought she's gonna become a doctor. I wanted that for her. I was like, you're so capable. It made her character very real as well, because like that wasn't where she went. Her journey found her in a way, her healing journey.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I didn't necessarily think she was going to go to medical school, but I thought she would come back. You remember when she was in the OR and she saved that kid's life by doing a trach?
Yeah.
But then she ended up getting fired for it. So that's where it kind of went off
Yes.
the rails for me, because I thought, okay, so now they're going to realize her capability as a nurse, right? And also sort of get that recognition that she deserves for being a nurse. You know, that didn't happen. So the fact that she kept getting like knocked down and kicked in the teeth with like, you know, addiction, and then what happened with Rye, which actually I didn't see coming. Like I thought that maybe she would end up with him, you know? So yes, he betrayed her
Yeah.
for sure. But then I kind of thought, okay, well, they're going to have, because it's like, seems like her true love. And I read that he was genuinely in love with her as well, like while they were in the war. But I felt like she just kept getting knocked down so many times. I felt like I wish the author
Yeah.
had made less times that she kept getting knocked down, because I'm like, again, you know, like, and the stuff with her parents and stuff. And I know at the end it came through, and I liked the way it ended, that she was helping other women with PTSD. So I thought that was really cool. But I think that maybe 2 or 3 of those knockdowns probably could have been eliminated, you know, by Kristin Hannah, if I were to give her notes for this book.
No, I agree with you. I think she gets like every turn. She even tried after she lost the baby to go get help. She went to the circle, and they're just like, "You're a woman.
You don't belong here.
So
You don't belong anywhere.
nobody wants to help her." She just kept on getting kicked when she was already down. Like it was just like, oh, when is she going to get a break?
For everything been through, right? Like she did.
Yeah.
I think that's realistic. I think it's realistic.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
realistic.
totally.
I think a lot of veterans.
The fact that she triumphed in the end is maybe she triumphed in the end in a way where she got to a place
Yeah.
where she was better, and maybe that even, I don't know the statistics, but maybe statistically that wasn't even that realistic. I'm just saying that like in the end she did triumph, so there was hope in the end, whereas it could have gone kind of the other way, and I'm sure it did for many people.
If it wasn't for her friends, I don't think she would have.
What good friendships too, eh?
That's how I felt too. It was like, and maybe this is more relatable to people who have been in the military and stuff, but I thought it was a really good representation of how people who come back from war or the military, like they do really struggle, and they struggle finding their community again because of the things that they've gone through. And like it really showed how she was getting knocked down so many times, but it felt really nice at the end. I felt like it came together nicely, where it's like I have my women, I'm helping other people with PTSD, like in the sense of it felt like a feel good for me. The change felt like a feel good for me in the sense that it felt like revenge. This one was a feel good where it felt like you can heal, women can heal through these crazy and really emotional hard times. Yeah, so I felt like it was a feel good, like a I just need me and my girls, you know?
I have a question for you guys because this is what I felt. I felt that the beginning was in Vietnam was way too long. And then the end when she's in Montana, I felt that the Montana part was super duper rushed through. I wanted to know more. Like, I've been waiting for the whole book for her to finally have her healing and her peace, and it was just a few chapters where it was like 300 pages or something like that, 250 pages of just Vietnam. I wanted more at the end if the beginning was so long. Like I feel like she could have cut down the Vietnam part a bit. I feel like it didn't need to be as long at that part. I feel like if they cut that part down and she made the end part longer, I would have felt a little bit. I liked the ending. It was very satisfying. I just wanted more of it. Like I've been waiting for it. And it was just, well, let's wrap it up. Everything worked out for her. The end. And it was like, what? No, tell me like more details. You gave me details about everything else. Why don't I have these details?
I kind of feel like for me, the book was more about like living through the war. And so the end where like she got to the end and she was going to survive in the end. Cause like for her, that whole period was survival, was getting to be able to go to war and being in the war and then coming back and dealing with the repercussions of the PTSD and all the stuff she saw there. For me, like when it was like and things were done, it was okay for me that I didn't have all the details, just the fact that she made it. So I think it's interesting because I think the amount of time spent on the war, again, I don't know that much about the Vietnam War either. And
Me
I think she
neither.
was trying to bring to light the thing that people don't know, especially about women in war, in that war, because of them coming back, being like, you're not there. And so I think it was important that they laid out kind of all this details so that when people told her, you don't belong here, you weren't in the war, even us as readers can be outraged that that happened.
Yeah, I think on many times in my head, I'm like, that's such a crock of bullshit. When they're like, women weren't in,
Yes.
they were, unless you were in actual combat, you didn't matter. So that must be so frustrating. And when I was doing like a little bit of research and looking up, to prepare for today, I was reading that Kristin Hannah did a lot of research on the Vietnam War. So it is really historically accurate. So I think that's really great because I didn't know that much about it. I'm born in 74. So, I remember hearing about it and knowing that there was a lot of controversy around it, whether US should have been in it or not. So I was really pleased to get to know a little bit more about it and to understand a little bit more of where that came from as well and how frustrating it must have been and like make people so angry to come back and not be, embraced as like a hero for their country, regardless of, what the
Government
government.
policy, right?
Yeah.
Like the people are taking out their rage against the government on individuals, which I mean happens. It happens today. People booing at sporting events, which is weird. It's like the people at the sporting event aren't making the policies in the states that people don't agree with or whatever. But I guess people do that all the time.
Yeah. But again, I really like reading about war. I think because like obviously I haven't lived through it or anything, and it's such an important piece of history war is. So I personally really enjoyed how long it was, and to know that she did a lot of research, I think is really that's great because this might be people's first and only introduction to the Vietnam War outside of like maybe the little blurb they learned in school. So I liked it for that. But based on that, what you were saying, Sarah, it also follows through with, I feel like, a lot of war stories where the main focus is what happened to them during the war, and then it's wrapped up very quickly at the end. It's, like only a very small part of the story is what happens to them after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I read a bunch of after I recorded my book report, and then I read some reviews, and a lot of people, Sarah, are different than you, just so you know, that a lot of people were saying they wish it was more about the war and not about the end. But I also want to bring up one of the points in the reviews. There were some people that were saying that they felt like it was so centered on the American white savior kind of idea and didn't represent the Vietnamese people and Vietnam in general as a country respectfully, because they really created the characters, any Vietnamese people, as just like these little bit parts that were stereotypes or different things. And then even describing the country was more about like the mold and like it was all kind of negative, like her bag is so moldy because she was in this monsoon, or that it was so damp there. Like everything was very more negative. And also because sentiment is that, maybe the Americans shouldn't, well, not maybe, the Americans shouldn't have done that, and that there was a lot of atrocities that happened towards the Vietnamese people, that some people were very upset and angry about the lack of representation of real Vietnamese characters in the book. So what does everybody think about that?
Makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree that that maybe there definitely could have been more. I do think I think that the way it was written and some of the when they did talk about the Vietnamese and what the Americans were doing and some, like with the napalm. I'm trying to give specific examples, but like the napalm, there was that one really bad battle, in the end when she was on her second tour. They were talking about the Vietnamese, like, oh, the woman that was clutching her baby. So I do think there was some of it where I personally didn't get the sense that it was all done from like sort of that white American perspective. I did feel that it came through for me anyway, from my opinion. It did come through about the atrocities were happening to the Vietnamese and the Vietnamese that had no part of the war, like the villagers, women, babies,
Yeah.
children.
Orphanage.
Yeah.
They mentioned bombing an orphanage. She mentioned that. Yeah.
It wasn't this exact same intensity from my perspective reading it. Like it was some of it was hard to read, like about the baby being burned to the mother. Like honestly, that was a tough one to read, and I imagine what would have really happened, So yeah, that's my perspective anyway. But
Yeah, and it wasn't her viewpoint. I mean, Frankie's viewpoint, right? It was her story, so is what she saw. So
And being a nurse, she probably spent less time she only spent time in the war torn parts of Vietnam because she was at a war hospital, right?
Yeah, I think it's hard because it is Frankie's point of view. I think that would be hard for her to tell her viewpoint not from an American, like
A privileged American too, right? Like
yeah,
she
yeah,
came from
like
money as well, right?
yeah, and I think that maybe if this was portrayed as a book that was historically accurate, just they advertised it differently, I think I would feel the same way about some of those reviews. But that's a hard line to tether when it's supposed to be a certain person's point of view. Like, and again, she's so young, and back then, she may not have even realized the internal race. Like, there's so many different things that I don't even know if Frankie, the character, really even realized herself, kind of, with that type of viewpoint.
yeah, and I mean, she came from a war family who was very
Yeah.
like rah people that go to war, or,
Have
soldiers or
honor.
whatever, or Navy. I think they were in the Navy, are heroes, and that's the noble thing to do. So that's her vietpoint as well.
so
I
my
also think that they could have developed a Vietnamese character, but you would have to find out, like, historically, did the Americans actually interact with any Vietnamese other than when they went to these orphanages and stuff to help kids and stuff? If they were going to actually have a character that had some character development that was Vietnamese, I wonder if it wasn't just historically accurate. Maybe they didn't really interact with Vietnamese people other than to help them So that's an interesting.
That's a good point. It'd be interesting to find a book that is in this same time period from the Vietnamese, like a main character that's Vietnamese on their point of view. I wonder if there's something out there. It'd be a nice compliment to read after reading this book. You know me, I like to read books in clusters. Like this one's doing this, and they're all kind of about the same theme. And then you could get kind of more layered nuance about the whole historical period.
Yeah, I imagine there's lots of maybe some books, some historical novels that are about that too. Like my grandfather was in the war and he's Black, and they did not think he'd come home because typically people of color had all the missions that were riskier, right? Like almost some of those like suicide missions. And so nobody thought he'd come home, you know? So obviously he did, but I think that there's a whole side of war, you know, that can be spoken from that point of view, you know, from
Which
like
war was he in? Like the Second World
Second
War?
World War. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
The Canadian government has made like the military records public, and you can search for people from your family that were in the war and read all of their file.
How do you do that?
My great uncle was in it. I'll have to find it. My great uncle died in the war, and I read through his personnel file, and it's got everything, his physicals and their comments about him, and he was a pilot, all the stuff they said about whether he was going to pass or if he was good or bad, or like, you know, what they thought. And yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know if it's just for people who have passed now or everyone. You'd think that somebody was still alive, it would be questionable. But they're like military pilot there.
Both my grandparents were in the war.
It was very interesting because I didn't know very much. And like he had flown to do this mission, and because of the weather, he didn't have enough fuel to return, and his plane went down. And they don't know, for a long time, they didn't know he was missing in action. And eventually they had to close his file. They put that he was presumed dead, but there was no found person, or his plane went down in enemy territory because it ran out of gas, essentially, because they didn't have enough on board to get home. It has like the letters that were sent to the family and all that stuff. So anyway, it's an interesting like glimpse into history, because you hear the family, either you do or you don't hear the family stories. Sometimes people who have gone to war don't talk about it when they come back, or if a family member died, they don't want to talk about it. And so you don't really know all the details, especially if you're waiting years and years for maybe word of your son and that he never comes home or whatever. And so you don't know if they've been captured or whatever.
That was my experience as well. Like when I met my grandfather in Trinidad, he did not want to talk about it. I was asking questions about the war and he didn't want to talk about it. So whatever I've heard has been through like other pieces in the family. But okay, I have a question for you guys about, I found it interesting, the relationship that Frankie had with her parents, like her mother and her father, and how it evolved throughout the whole course of the book. So I just want to get your perspective on that too, because it was interesting, right? About the dad not valuing her contributions in the war. But I thought her mother was really interesting as well, like how she started off being really shallow and like all she cared about was
Image.
Thank you. Yeah, image. And then how it sort of changed throughout the novel. So I wanted to get your perspective on that, because I thought that was, aside from the women's, like her friendships, I thought her parents were really interesting development as well. Did you feel that too? Like about the parents, like and how the dad treated her and
I think after the stroke is when her mom kind of turned around. Maybe because she could see Frankie's skills as a nurse versus I want my daughter to get married, maybe. Don't you think that's kind of where the turning point with the mom is? The turning point for the dad was way later when he thought she was killing herself. That's when it turned for him, I think. Don't you think? But the mom, I think, is the stroke and that she like nursed her back. What do you
I
guys
found
think?
it interesting when the mom gave her the drugs.
Yes, I forgot that.
What did they call them?
Mother's Little Helper.
Mother's Little Helper. What are they in real life? Or what's the real name? They're,
Percocet?
Wasn't it Valium?
I don't know, one of those.
Yeah.
Valium and Percocet, like one for up, one for down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder, how often that happened, that she's like, oh, just have these. This will make you feel better. You can get through the day. And you think that the mom probably did that,
As
to get
well.
through her day. I would imagine there were lots of other women. I think there were. I think I read that because, and that it's just, it's unfortunate that people, suffer from addiction and that she went through that. But how you would feel as a mother that I think she was probably in denial that it was her it was her giving her daughter this thing that ended up being
Just numb your feelings and you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
right.
This is like, Yeah, it's crazy. It revealed another part of history where it wasn't just women who had PTSD from going to war and stuff like that that were trying to deal with complicated feelings and not having any other option. Maybe they had other options, but like the easiest option and maybe widespread enough that people could justify it, right? Be like, "Oh, just do this."
The socially acceptable method was just take this pill.
Socially acceptable. Thanks, Sarah.
Right? Don't have your feelings. Just let it go. Forget it. Everyone kept on telling her, just forget it. Just put it in the past. Like, just forget about it. And she's like, I'm trying, but I can't just forget.
Stop feeling so much.
Yeah.
You'll give yourself wrinkles.
Stop feeling. Or talking. That's another thing. By the end of it, her parents were talking about stuff. And that's because she learned that if you hold things down, and she had so much trauma to hold down, you know what I mean? Like, she couldn't possibly hold it all down. Like miscarriages and Vietnam War and everything. So much loss. Her
manipulative men.
Yeah, like so much. Her brother dying after she signed up for him to go with him, and then he dies before she even leaves. Like, and that was her person. Like all of it. Like, oh, poor Frankie.
Yeah. I felt it was accurate, like the mom wanting to keep things almost for show, like just everyone telling her to also forget about it, push your feelings down, etc. Like it really, to me, felt like that was so accurate for the time. It was frowned upon to talk about your feelings, the hardships that you're going through, your addiction, your complicated relationships. And it was so frustrating to read, to hear people who are supposed to like love you tell you to kind of get over what's happening to you. But I think she helped break those barriers for her parents. Like, even though it did take a longer time, especially for her dad, I think she helped that. And that's what I saw, was she's helping her parents to also change in a more accepting and better way, because I'm sure the way that they grew up was even more strict type of thing. Like, you really don't talk about anything that's wrong, right? Like, you have a husband and a wife and a kid, and that's good and merry. So yeah, I felt like she was really maybe not on purpose trying to help her parents, but she did in the end show them that like the way that you guys were living was not sustainable or healthy when such traumatic things are happening.
Right. Her parents are giving advice like, this is how I learned to deal with it. But she's learning something new, and the younger generation can teach the older generation different things. When we're kids, sometimes we assume that adults know everything, but they're just people. They're just trying to deal the way that they know. And sometimes that's not always the best way or the healthiest way.
Yeah, I really wanted for her though, you know, in the end when Henry was at her parents' house and he saw the dad's office and how he had that the wall of like the wall of
Heroes Wall.
Yeah, I really wanted at that point for her dad to have put up her photo as well.
I know.
You know, and then when he
that would have been so
said,
sweet.
your wedding picture's going to be going up there. I was like, oh,
I forgot about Henry. I forgot about him completely. I read this a while back.
Him.
I loved him too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a good friend in the end too. But, you know, he was like, well, she, you know, the lady he ends up with, he's like, she loves me, you know? And it's like he loved Frankie, but he knew that she didn't. So, but he was willing to love her anyway. I don't know.
I think he also knew like she just wasn't, she needed help, and she just wasn't opening up that way. Like he could see it, right? And she just wasn't ready. Maybe
that's why I was, you know, really hoping for her and Rye to work out, that if it wasn't going to work out for Henry, who was this really good guy and genuinely loved her and didn't have some of the flaws that all the other men had, that I was hoping it would work out, you know, so that if it didn't work out with Henry, that she was really destined, you know, to be with Rye. But then, you know, that didn't happen either. So,
well, maybe at the end there's a little like maybe.
But I still this
spoiler.
Should I say the spoiler? Okay,
spoiler.
This is a big spoiler,
Say
but that's what made me be like, okay, this is I'm fine. When Jamie and her like get back together, I was like, okay, great.
I was waiting for him to come back ever since The Rock puts his rock, so he has it. I was like, he's coming back, and then it was going on and on and on. I was like, where the hell is Jamie? What about that rock?
He didn't die too. Of course, everything horrible happens to her. Of course, he died. He's not coming back.
I was like, at least the Rock's gonna show up. Like, I'm looking at the thing, and then like right at the end, the Rock gave me hope.
I was secretly hoping that the person that came back wasn't Rye, but Finley. Because, Finley, they never found, they just had someone else's boots. I was hoping that Finley was the one coming back. So I was disappointed when it was
I think you're
Who was
supposed to be
Finley?
her
Who was
brother.
Finley? Oh, her
Brother.
brother.
her brother.
Sorry.
But I think that's part of the
Right.
pain that they're trying to show in war is that some people, they don't come back and there's no body and you never know
I know.
if they were in a POW or not, or
Mhm.
Well,
who
because of our
knows?
family history, I was secretly hoping, being like, I don't care if nothing else works out, as long as Finley comes out. Even at the memorial when she met Jamie, I was hoping Finley somehow would just end up showing up or something. I was really rooting for Finley, but he didn't come back.
That would have been a good twist too. Yeah,
I
'cause I
think
thought
that would have made me
yeah.
cry, to be honest. If Finley came back at the end, I would have been sobbing in tears because when I was younger, me and my brother were so close, like inseparable. So reading that like she lost her brother, of course, gut-wrenching and putting yourself into that position. Again, if he came back at the end, wow. Waterworks would have been everywhere.
Me too.
I did
Yeah.
cry at the end, so not because of
Oh
that.
yeah.
I did cry at the end. Yeah. I found it so like her finding her place, and when she was at the memorial and looking at her brother's name and her parents being there, and yeah, I just found it very touching. I definitely I rarely cry at the end of books, and I was Laird was sleeping beside me, my partner. I was like but like trying not to sob out because he was sleeping, like finishing the book, and I'm like, don't.
He looks over and they're just like wet and it's all over the pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I cried a little bit when the parents were there and she didn't know they were coming. I was
Yeah.
like, and then the dad saying what he said, I was like, finally!
You guys are making me cry right now. Don't do
Aw.
it. Look at me, I'm like the tears are starting.
I still would have wanted Finley though. Jamie's
Yeah.
fine. He was great. Perfect. Made me feel good. But Finley would have been like, I would have been over the moon.
Newsflash, Sarah wants a happy ending. It's just like every book you're like, it wasn't the happiest ending.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Every book.
But she needs all of the happiness to happen.
Always.
It's like, oh, Finley came back and so was ruined and this person got a promotion and that person won the lottery. It's just
And
like-
everyone lived happily ever after.
Right. That's why I was like, the war part was too long. It was too horrible. Like, let's just a little bit. I needed enough to care and know about Vietnam. Like, I needed to know what she went through, but I felt like there was just like one thing after the other at Vietnam. It was just like, and I would have been okay if the book was a super long book and the end was super long too. I would have been fine with that. But I guess, yeah, I'm always looking for the happy parts.
See, this
That's
is
what
a
I'm looking
market
for.
that is just like primed to be for somebody to like manipulate here. You take all these popular books and you write a spin-off that's just the happy ending.
Oh,
Right? You call this
yeah.
one just the happy ending. And then you have one that's just like just the vengeful ending or whatever. And you just have these books for people who want that or they want the twist, the unhappy ending. And then just see how it goes. I think you could do something. It would just have to be short and people would be like finally satisfied.
Just like one
Yeah,
chapter of
little-
each, and that's how it ends.
There you go.
Totally.
Business
Be like,
idea.
I'll write little chapters of every book. I was like, actually, what happened?
Yeah.
It would even
ending.
have to be good. People would just be like, oh, thank goodness that happened. Like people like spin-offs.
Like, you
The
know,
zombie version.
Something other than the happy ending that I might get.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a good name. Maybe for an OnlyFans account, you could use that name.
Hey, yeah. If you pay me enough, why not?
I've been putting books down lately that just aren't like uplifting enough, where there's too much sorrow and heartache or like abuse of children, that kind of thing. Like,
You know what? Actually, there's a thing. So I learned this when I took a screenwriting course. It was actually Shonda Rhimes, her screenwriting course. And she said that what studios are looking for, if, like, for instance, right now there's a lot of war and horrible images we see in real life, that TV shows or movies about those things, those studios won't pick up because people won't watch them because they already lived them. They want something to escape. And when things are really happy and peaceful and doing well, those books about wars and stuff, people are more likely to pick up because they are not in it every day. So right now, because there's lots of turmoil in the world, people are more likely to gravitate to shows and movies and stuff that have happy endings or maybe a little bit uplifting, because they already have so much in real life on the news, constantly being bombarded with it, that they don't want to. So it's a thing, like Shonda Rhimes Teaks Center, of course, you need to find out from the studios what's going on. I wouldn't have been able to sell Grey's Anatomy during a different time.
During COVID.
During COVID.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I watched
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy, and I had to like, it was a struggle to watch that show during, because they were all wearing masks, and you're like, I don't want to be,
Mhm.
I don't want to
It's
see.
too real.
Yeah, it's too real. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
There's
agree.
a thing.
I was going to ask
That's
you,
interesting.
Virginia, if that was the reason why you seem to be gravitating towards maybe like more lighthearted, feel-good books, is because it's just thing after disaster after bad news. Like it's all every day, right? It's to the point where sometimes it's not even shocking anymore. So yeah, I was going to ask if maybe the state of the world right now, if that's guiding what you're reading.
Totally. It's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for a while, like even during COVID, I picked up the Goldfinch, put it down, which I never do.
Yeah. What a good book, but it's heavy,
Yeah,
right?
it's so
It's
much. Like,
heavy.
you know, I started reading My Dark Vanessa, but the professor was abusing her. No, thank you. You know, I had to put that down, even though, like, you know, I'm sure it's like great novels and complicated and great stories. Oh, Demon Copperhead. Have you guys started reading that?
I
No.
haven't, no.
No, but I want to. I have it on my to read
It's
list.
spectacular. But same thing, this poor kid has a terrible upbringing and is
Oh,
getting through it, you
no.
know, like again, just more things
Right.
like I can't do this. Yeah. So yeah, that's exactly it though, Ashley. It's just I feel like there's enough, like life is hard enough, you know, like in the
Yeah,
news,
totally.
or, you know, I just want something a little, I don't want unicorns and puppies all the time, but just not kids getting, you know, abused or like addiction, you know, like really awful human atrocities
Right.
that are
You're like,
real, that are going
I'm
on.
already hearing about people losing their rights and kids in war zones. So like, do we need to
Yeah, kids in
think about
cages,
it?
like
Yeah.
the opioid crisis,
Occurring.
right? Like we're already living through so much of this.
Yeah, let's get something. I think actually our next book, Mary, you said yours is funny, right? So we
Okay,
pick
it's
another.
funny and there's some heavy bits. I chose it because I was like, I want something funny. I read like the first chapter, I was like, that's hilarious. But as you read through it, there's some heavy bits in the book too, but she's making light of like
Perfect.
mostly herself. But anyway, so we'll see. There might be a little bit of this. But the nice thing about a funny book like that gets heavy later, you can go back to the funny bit and read the part about the bucket. If you go on our Book Interrupted website, you'll see me in a bucket, and that's based on a scene in the book where she gets stuck in a bucket. So
Oh, right on.
hilarious. Yeah.
Perfect.
And mine is not joyful. So
Nobody getting stuck in a bucket.
No, I know yours is going to be. I know.
sorry.
You gotta have a mix.
So hopefully things turn around before. Yeah,
What's yours? What's your book?
My book. Oh,
Hers
what's
is-
it called? Can't
I'll grab
remember.
it for you.
We rip the world apart.
Yeah, we ripped the world apart.
Well, that didn't sound like it was gonna be
Yeah.
a funny
No,
one.
it is not.
Yeah.
I haven't read the whole thing, so I just started reading it, but
Yeah.
it's definitely not. It's going to be intense, and yeah. So just
Yeah.
be prepared
I'm
for
excited
We
for
have-
the next two books. Yeah.
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 Okay, so that's all the time we have. Any last thoughts?
Virginia, do you want to end it up with something about your book?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, how about like a recommendations kind of thing? So
Okay.
I would definitely recommend this book for sure, especially for the theme around sisterhood and the importance of girlfriends in one's lives to
Mhm.
help keep you uplifted, also keep you grounded, to like really keep it real, like when you are struggling. I think that for me was the greatest part of this book, is this character being surrounded by just really, really great girlfriends that would, well, really like would have died for her. So
Yeah.
so that to me is the greatest part of the book. So how about you all? What's the greatest thing that you've taken away from this book?
For me too, the
I-
friendships. Her girlfriends were the best.
They
I
saw
didn't care
her.
about the guys and stuff. Yeah, they always showed up. Always. They just arrived. And she was like, oh, I just want to burden them. And they're like, no, you're not no. I loved it. Yeah.
Yay, women.
I love war books, so I would recommend this to anyone who really likes war information. Also, I agree that the friends having her back in a time where, especially after COVID, we really were so isolated, and I think people are struggling to find and have community. This, I think, really hones in on how it doesn't even have to be your family, like it could be your chosen family, your friends. That's how you heal,
Chosen family, I like that.
in my opinion. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. Yay, women.
Awesome. Woo!
Yay, friendships.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Okay. Wonderful. Yay.
Well,
Good
thanks. It's
choice.
been really fun. So thanks for
Yeah, it was great seeing you, Virginia.
This interruption is brought to you by Unpublished. Do you want to know more about the members in Book Interrupted? Go behind the scenes? Visit our website at www.bookinterrupted.com.
Book interrupted.
This is my first book interruption, and it is a whopper of an interruption. I recently brought a book from Kristin Hannah called The Nightingale to a trip to Paris. It's my first time ever going there at beyond midlife, and so I was pretty excited to go see it. I was excited to have a book to read in between seeing the sights, and I'm happy to report that my interruption is that I was too busy seeing the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, the Musée d'Orsay, Notre Dame Basilica with the new renovations done, Sacré-Cœur, eating croissants and eclairs and baguettes and lots of wine. So I'm thrilled that I had that interruption, and I actually only cracked the book on my way home on the flight. So I imagine my next interruption is going to be much less boring than that. But there you go.
Book interrupted.
It's book report time. We're going to find out from each member their final thoughts, and do they recommend the book? Let's listen.
This is Virginia, and this is my book report for the novel The Women by Kristin Hannah. Overall, I would give this book a 7.5 out of 10. The positive parts about this book were that it was a very compelling novel, and I like the themes that were woven throughout about love, loss, resilience through the lens of women's experiences during the Vietnam War that I didn't know very much about, so I was intrigued to learn more about the war. I deeply connected with the author, how they showcased the power of female friendship that was mainly done in the face of adversity, and I thought that was really important to highlight and showcase that your female friendships are really important for getting you through traumatic times in one's life. I also thought it was really interesting that it dove into the complexities of, returning home after war and everything that soldiers grapple with, when they return home, like that, the sense of, identity that Frankie went through, the purpose that she has to now try to reintegrate into life and what her new purpose is, and that she was an extremely competent nurse, and then she comes home and doesn't have the same reassurances in society, and given also the time that this novel takes place in as well, and the role that women have, and the lesser role that they have in society, and she has to come to terms with that and sort of struggle through it, especially when she was, this hero of war. So I also liked the complexities that they brought together with the family as well. What I didn't love so much, and what sort of withdrew, the 2.5 stars that I would have given this book, is the role of her romantic relationships. I actually didn't buy most of it. I didn't like the relationship she had with Rye at the end. I didn't buy it that's how it would unfold. So that was sort of the biggest takeaway from that. But all in all, I thought that this book was a testament to the strength and resilience of women and the challenges that women rise to, and how they often emerge stronger, especially with the support system around them. So I would recommend this book, but it definitely, may not be the bestseller. I'm actually in the midst of starting to read Kristin Hannah's next novel called The Nightingales, which also centers around war. So there's definitely a theme there. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, and would love to hear some of your comments about this novel as well, about the women, on the Book Interrupted Instagram page. Until next time, happy reading.
This is Ashley, and I'm doing my personal journal for the book The Women. I believe that it is our 4th book of the season, and I want to start by saying, not to be a weirdo, but I really enjoy listening and reading about historical wars. I think it's fascinating, devastating. It's really interesting to me to read about the extremes that humans will go to. I enjoyed that part of the book. I was excited to read it. I actually read it. I didn't listen to audiobook, even though I think I've almost every single book on this podcast I've listened to audiobook. So I did actually read it, which I enjoyed. My biggest gripe, and I think this is just maybe it's just with the current social climate right now, but I am so over books or TV shows where it's just person after person falling in love with the main character type of thing. And maybe that's just me. I didn't super love that part of the book. I know that's not the main focus. Those weren't my favorite details. I thought this was a very emotional book. Some parts were very hard to read and very graphic. Overall, I did really like this. I would recommend this book, absolutely. I love how it all kind of gets wrapped up in it shows that you need your family support, you need your girlfriends or your friends' support, and that's how, not necessarily move on, but that's how you're able to heal yourself and heal the other people around you, even going through some of the most traumatic experiences. So I thought this was a good book. I enjoyed reading it, and I'm so excited to talk to the girls about what they think of it.
So The Women is a book that's set during the Vietnam War, and I guess a little bit before and a bit after as well. And it was very eye-opening as historical fiction because I didn't really know very much about the Vietnam War, and especially how women who served in the war were treated. I first read this book as part of my other book club, and I can say that the strongest emotion that comes from this book is just anger at how these women were treated and how their service was denied. They came back looking for support. Not only were a lot of the people who served in the military in Vietnam kind of rejected when they came back because of how people felt about the war in general, but it sounds like the women were denied even being there. People would just be like, you weren't in the war because you're a woman. And so they couldn't even get support for the people that were offering support. And so there's so many parts of this book that just make you angry, angry how the different people treated them like the parents and, strangers. And then there's the whole, love interest thing where the only real people that Frankie, the main character, could trust were her girlfriends. So that was kind of the feel-good part. Her girlfriends, the women that served with her in Vietnam, were there for her and helped her survive when she was there and when she came home. I would recommend this book. I enjoyed it. I read it first and then I listened to it again for this podcast so I could remember. I tend to have a bit of a short memory for books, but I do remember enjoying the book and also it being a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. So it was hard to put down. I wanted Frankie to survive and thrive, and it was really hard to live through all of her struggles. And I don't think there's much else I want to say that I didn't say in the group discussion. So I'm going to end it there before I start battling on. Okay, bye.
The Women. Not really sure, Sarah here. I'm not really sure how I feel about the book. Okay, here's where I'll start. The book was really long. And the beginning of the book I found kind of dragged on. And it's hard to say that when it's a book about war and I'm learning so much. And, you know, she's a nurse in a combat hospital. So there's lots of things happening and you really feel for her. But it felt, I don't want to say repetitive, but I feel like that section could have been cut down a bit. And I still would have felt all the feels of Frankie working in this hospital. And then also the chapters didn't really have much of a cliffhanger. So it didn't like draw you back in. And I've read other Kristin Hannah books. The Nightingale was a huge book, super long, and I couldn't put it down. I read it so fast. I could not get enough of that book. Just feel like this one maybe needed to be, I don't know, the beginning was really long for me. And then at the same time, the very end was wrapped up way too fast for me. I feel like the part where she had come back from Vietnam was the perfect amount and she was struggling and stuff like that. I felt that was a good amount of her struggling, I think. But the end just like wrapped up like all of a sudden she's good, you know, and she finds her way, whatever. I don't want to have a ton of spoilers in this, but she finds her way and that part's great, but it's like a couple chapters. Whereas like the beginning of the book just like goes on and on and on. And because it took me so long to read, I physically read half. And then I had to read the other half in an audiobook because I just didn't have time to finish reading the book because it was so long. And I think that's another thing. It just didn't keep me as a gauge. So sometimes when books are like really exciting and have cliffhangers, I keep on reading even more than one chapter. But because it didn't really do that, I'd read a chapter and then go to bed, and you just couldn't do that with the size of a book. So anyway, I read half an audiobook and half not. The audiobook was excellent. I think the people who did it did a really great job. I love the end of this book as well. I didn't expect it at all, so that always makes me happy. It's a satisfying ending and kind of a surprise ending. So that was nice. I was hoping for a different surprise, and I don't want to totally spoil the book. Maybe I've already spoiled it in the group discussion, so maybe that's already happened. I can see why Meredith also said I would be so angry because Frankie is still a vet and she tries to get help for being a vet in Vietnam. And they're like, well, you weren't in combat, so you get no help. Like, you don't have trauma, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. All she did was see trauma the whole time. So it's ridiculous. And it's upsetting that women had to fight to be like, we were there too. And also the whole hero wall thing, like women can't be heroes, like that was kind of upsetting too. Anyway, like poor Frankie and the other women of Vietnam and other wars, they don't get the attention or the services or the support that the men get, which from finishing this book makes me think that maybe that has changed a little bit, hopefully. Anyway, I look forward to talking to everyone else about it. I didn't really know that much about the Vietnam War, actually. It was one where I haven't really, which makes sense because it was the war that nobody wants to talk about, which is also interesting. So I think that's great. I think the author did a real service to people that were in that war to really shine a light on the veterans, because if nobody wants to talk about it, it causes an additional trauma to the people that fought. Anyway, okay, that's all I have to say.
All right. So, the women. I really loved this book. I'm going to go out and find more books written by this author because I heard that they are also excellent. I'm really not a war movie or book person. I often avoid them. Like even if it's supposed to be this spectacular movie, like it just doesn't interest me. And it's not that I want to know what happened in our history, but it's just upsets me, and so I generally don't watch war or read war things. But I just found this book so well written, and I just felt like I really connected to Frankie the character, and that reading her journey, I learned so much. Like, I really didn't know a lot about the Vietnam War, and I had said that to a few people who are older than me, and they were surprised that I hadn't known, but because I didn't really live through it, or I didn't live through it, not really, I just didn't live through it. So I didn't really know a lot, and I didn't realize how long it went on. I didn't realize when all those vets came back to America, how they were treated. They weren't treated like heroes. and that how horrific it was, how many of them lost their lives and their limbs. And also when the women with the nurses came back home, and how people kept saying that there were no women in Vietnam and they were denied a lot of access to help. Oh, the PTSD. And I mean, the story was really difficult to read at times, and I struggled because it was hard, because I really felt for the characters. But then I just kept going, and at the end, I just found it such a beautiful story at the end, and I cried, which I don't normally do at the end of books, but I was crying. And yeah, so I actually don't even have the book with me, because I lent the book to my mom for her to read. So it's at my parents' house and not here. So I can't even hold it, which I normally do during my book reports. So I would highly recommend the book. I think that it's a really engaging, well-written book. I also really liked that Kristin Hannah, that's the author, she did a lot of research. She interviewed a lot of vets. She also used real place names, which I thought was really good. So I do feel like you can learn something from the book. And it just really touched and moved me. So yes, 2 thumbs up for me. I highly recommend. And I was trying to see if there's anything else I have to say, but not. So yes to me. Great.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Book Interrupted. If you'd like to see the video highlights from this episode, please go to our YouTube channel, Book Interrupted. You can also find our videos on www.bookinterrupted.com.
Are you interested in buying this book? Do you want to order the next book so you can read along? Go to www.bookinterrupted.com/shop to see a complete list of our books. And if you haven't tried them yet, our affiliate partners, The Bookshop and Libro.fm, both help support your local bookstore where available. Thanks for taking the time to check in and connect. We'll see you next time on Book Interrupted.
Book Interrupted.
Never forget, every child matters.